What could have made a difference to this show if it was actually made in an alternate world? Well, figure that out in part 2 to What If Deku Met These Two Women. Well, you want to see the part 3 of this series? Get this video to about 100 likes in 24 hours. You'll see it eventually. Or if you get this video to about 70 comments, I know who the guy is going to spam for that. Yeah, I'm looking at you, dude. I hope you'll enjoy this video. 2 days later, after the events all unfolded for this story, Izuku and, well, I can't remember the Oni's name, and I know you're going to be pissed about it. Let's just call her Oni for now. As she grabbed Izuku's arm, forcing him out of bed. "Come on, Izuku," she shouted in a dominant tone, but still excited. As Izuku barely even shook himself awake to be greeted with, well, 2 sheets of paper on his desk, and 2 discs. As Izuku flipped his over first, to be greeted with a photo and, a video of All Might. It's him explaining to Izuku that he passed with flying colors, and he managed to get a profitable amount of points, somewhere around 60 rescue points as he did in the canon counterpart, and about 70 odd villain points, leading him to number 1. As for, well, Oni, I'm going to pause the recording in a little bit and just find her name. She got about 60 points and about 5 rescue points. In total, she managed to get 65. Didn't her... She was excited still. She managed to get 3rd place, but her being below Bakugo kind of annoyed her. As Izuku and her both shook and, well, surprised in own meaning, Izuku didn't even know he could even pass the exam. Well, he could do. He had one for all, for Christ's sake. Even with the power of one for all, he still had the tinge at the back of his head to know he wouldn't fail. But he couldn't pass what he thought in his head, but he knew he could. As Izuku and, well, Kirika both left the home to go rush downstairs to go meet with her parents and tell them the good news. As 3 days later, after they stood in front of the UA dorms, as they both all got settled in, as Izuku got undressed and got undressed in his UA attire to go to his first class of the day. Everything would go like normal until she arrived, as she shocked everyone with their height, muscle mass, and so on and so forth. Aizawa came introducing everybody as they all went downstairs into ground beta. I've forwarded on the story a little bit to make it seem not a little bit boring. If you're wondering where she's going to be, she's going to be here soon. As Izuku and her both arrived down at, well, ground beta, as they both got told they would have to do a training test, as Izuku went first, ignoring Bakugo's furious glare. As Izuku went over to throw the ball as his quirk was cancelled. "Izuku, I know you're holding back, but try and make everything down to a minimum. You used 100% in the exam and broke your arm, so try and hold back just a little bit," Aizawa said, as Izuku cocked his arm back and threw it with 65%, with just enough not to break his arm, but it still sprained it nonetheless. As Izuku threw it and it blew past, creating a giant crater in the ground. If you all have ever seen Yujiro Hanma punch the ground, well then, just imagine that, as the air force surrounded Izuku as it blasted, as it kept on going and going and going and going until Aizawa pointed his phone at Izuku, it's saying, well, infinity. As she came up to have her turn, well, she asked Aizawa if she could use her bat, which was denied, as she just threw the ball with all her strength, leaving it to around 400 to 500 meters. Just remember, she's an Oni. She has a lot more physical strength than humans do at her base. As everyone else was surprised, as Izuku went over and clapped her. Well, not in that way, in the hand, like. As Izuku and her were both happy, as Aizawa looked at them. "You think this is a game? Huh? Alright then, last place gets expelled," he said, in vigor. As Aizawa walked over and grabbed Izuku's hand. "It's not a game, child. It's life or death. Make a decision on the battle like that, you can ruin somebody else's life like that. Choose your fights." Aizawa said, looking at him with death glare shining into his spine. That day was finished as the point value came back in. Izuku at number 1. Well, his girlfriend-to-be, Leonie, is in number 2, Momo at number 3, Bakugo at number 4, Todoroki at 5, and the rest goes on like canon. No one actually got expelled. That was a logical ruse, of course. He thought Izuku would get last, but he was dead like most of the times, but he's still the GOAT of the anime. As Izuku and the rest of his normal team as the Deku squad went home, as the next day arose, both arrived at UA, as this is where a little thing turns a little bit. Instead of All Might teaching today, because his time limit had been reduced every month, there's only got an hour left. Izuku has spent the past hours training with All Might, has decreased his time limit exponentially, so instead of All Might we'll be getting Vlad today. As Vlad actually came through the door, and we're not in a hurry, man, like normal. You're not gonna have someone go straight through the door, are you? As Izuku and Kirika both went down to the changing rooms, in their separate ones of course, as Mineta tried to peek a hallway through to actually try and see Kirika, but Izuku grabbed his head, with Izuku being stuck on, Mineta's head. He started bashing him against the wall until he finally passed out, as Mineta would be dragged to Recovery Girl at that very day. That day is known as Fuck with Izuku and Kirika's relationship. As Izuku and Kirika both got to the front room, as Izuku finally saw himself in his hero outfit for the first time with Kirika, if you've ever seen how the warrior Onis actually dress, you can see for yourself, but it's a lot less revealing. As Izuku and them both got into their separate teams as Vlad got and put them in. As just like canon, Izuku and Ochako would actually become teams, but because of Izuku's overwhelming strength, Aizawa recommended to put all the strong people onto, the villain team. Instead of it being 2, it's 3 instead to make it fair. As for a handicap, Izuku couldn't use more than about 10 to 20% of his power at minimum times. It's a handicap. Aizawa knew how strong he was, and knew how much percentage he can control. So, he handicapped himself for a reason. As Izuku and Ochako both went inside the building, as Izuku would see Bakugo first, as Izuku would tell Ochako to run, but this wouldn't help it at all, as Ida would rush around the corner, grabbing Ochako and capturing her. As Izuku would see this happen, he didn't know what to do for the time. Him not, controlling most of his power and questioning his mobility at this point, he thought of something that could probably help, something he saw in a movie, as he clutched both his hands together and slammed it on the ground, creating a nice vigor of, shockwave. As Izuku would go under, run underneath, and jump with all of his power to try and get to the bomb. As Izuku would get to the bomb's room, as Izuku would see Todoroki there, as Todoroki would place an ice barrier between him and, the bomb. As Bakugo would rush upstairs, not knowing where Izuku would actually land or where he would be, but he gathered he would be at the bomb. As Bakugo tried to bum rush Izuku, Izuku tossed Bakugo over his shoulder, throwing him against the wall, knocking him out, leaving him incapacitated. As Izuku would grab nearest to the bomb, putting his arm in, as Izuku would try and break the ice, but Ida would rush in, clocking Izuku in the head, throwing him slightly off balance. As Izuku would clap his hands together, creating a dust cloud to try and distract them. As at this point, he put his arms onto the wall and throwing himself forward, creating a nice little sprint of inertia to push him through the ice barrier, clicking him on the bomb, making him and his team become the winner. As Izuku would go back into the observation room, everyone staring at him in shock, seeing how advanced he was already in the class. Blood King came up to him, put his hand on his shoulder and asked him what percentages he stayed at. He stayed at 15 the entire time, he said, telling a slight bit white lie. He had to swap between 20% and 15 continuously, just to be able to keep up. As Izuku managed to actually tell his teacher that without actually trying to cringe or lie. Izuku would spend the rest of the day doing everything from canon, as Kirika, both actually, and Izuku both went and left the school for the day. As they came back the next day, as Aizawa handed them out some exclamation forms to tell them that we are going on a trip tomorrow. Well, it's more of mission slips. I don't know how they pronounce it in Japan, I really don't. As Izuku and them both, well, tell their parents about it. Kirika's parents were hesitant at first, not knowing what this was, but Aizawa managed to talk them into it, of course. He's a fucking goat. As Izuku and them both arrived at the USJ, this is where I'm actually going to put some detail into the story, so if you don't like that, there's a little timestamp here. Or you can switch to 15 minutes in, where we're going to actually introduce a new character. As Izuku and Kirika both arrived at the USJ, as everything would go normal, Shigaraki and Kirigiri would both attack, and they would both gradually kill each other off. Well, not that, they teleport each other away. As Izuku and Kirika were both taken to the landslide zone, them not knowing exactly where they were until Todoroki throws a bunch of villains off, leaving them all incapacitated without killing them. As Izuku and Kirika would both go up to one of them and ask them what did they want. As one of the villains wouldn't talk, but the moment Kirika released her bloodlust, the guy started talking. He had loose lips and everything started to talk more and more, as their secret weapon was apparently a girl, about the same size as her but with horns and everything. They didn't know what she was or anything, but to them, she looked more like a demon. As Izuku and them both arrived, they both arrived in between, well, Aizawa getting his head caved in. As Izuku was about to rush in, as Kirika grabbed Izuku's arm, telling him not to rush in, blinded. As Izuku didn't listen, he loosened his grip to tell Kirika to distract the main villain, as he or she would go grab Aizawa, and Todoroki would leave an ice wall in between them to make sure they couldn't run past and try and grab them. As Izuku would try his best to try and distract them best they can, as Izuku would barge straight in, grabbing her and tossing her off Aizawa, as Izuku's plan was engaged. As Kirika grabbed Aizawa, as they both dipped out of that argument to, well, the most dangerous part of their life. As Izuku would try and get into the fight of his life, well, in his maxed out form of course at 62%, but let's carry on with that one. As Izuku would go up to her and asked her why she was doing this, she didn't respond. As Izuku clapped his hands forward, leaving some air pressure to try and blind her. As he jumped up and did a Manchester smash to her head, trying to cave her skull in at the first go, as she dodged it and leaving Izuku paralyzed in fear, knowing that his one shot almost missed. Well, it did miss, not almost missed. As Izuku would try and get her to talk, but to no avail. As Izuku would try and land as many blows as All Might did in the canon counterpart. Blow after blow, they were both trading blows every time. As Izuku finally managed to get his grip on the fight, to make her talk was a success now. As every punch from then on came more and more speech from her. As Izuku finally got her to say her name. "What's your name?" Izuku said out loud. "My name is Kaveda," she said, as she grabbed the hold of her arm, throwing her across the USJ, and landing one final blow at 100% of his power, throwing her outside of the USJ. As her arms would pull back into her chest and fall into wings the moment she extended them, as she flew right back into USJ and Izuku. Seeing his broken arm, using this as an opportunity, she bun rushed him at that point, leaving him, well, disarmed, quite literally. As Izuku was ready to throw his last smash until she came up to him and hugged him in between her ample breasts. There's going to be a point where YouTube demonetizes me again. I already know there's going to be. So, little head warning, this video from this point on is rated M for mature. as Izuku and her were both in an embrace, her hugging him tightly as he was trying to push her away. As Kirika saw this, as she got enraged, rushing down, but the moment she rather rushed down, the front doors were thrown off its hinges as All Might was there, in his buff form, fully charged and ready to fight. But the moment he saw everything happening, he was very confused with what was happening down the middle. He thought his successor was dead in between her chests, as he went down and punched her with all of his might, leading her to being thrown back. As he grabbed his successor and threw him all the way to the top of the stairs. "Back off, villain," All Might said. "Who are you to get in between us?" she said. "You dirty human." As she grabbed All Might's head, throwing him to the ground. As All Might uses his advantage, tossing his legs around the person's arm, leading her into a vice grip. As she was about to scream in agony, until All Might let go, as he curve stomped her head into the concrete and threw her out of the USJ again. "Okay, that's that villain sorted," All Might said. "As for you, who are you?" All Might said, with a menacing aura around him. As All Might was about to continue, until he was rushed down once more by the demon-like woman. As All Might got his grip onto the floor and threw her against the wall, and then threw her to the stairs, as she saw Izuku once more, and tried to go to grab him. As this was her mistake, as the moment she got near Izuku to say "darling," as Izuku's face was turned red at that point. I'm guessing from the blood loss, but hidey-ho. As Izuku was about to, be captured, Kirika came in and slammed her head against the wall, leading her with a heavy concussion with her mallet. As everyone was wondering where she had the mallet from, but we're not gonna test logic. As Izuku was shocked and enraged by some villain calling him darling, but it's not showing the rage that Kirika had towards that. Jesus Christ, her murderous intent must have been huge. As the villains used this chance to escape from All Might as other teachers came through. As the demon girl got captured and led to Yue's holding cell, which her quirk was dampened to high hell. As a couple hours later went by after when everyone got comfortable, as All Might went down there in his civilian form, asking her, why did she attack Yue? "Well, I thought it was going to be fun at first, and fight someone strong and that, but I won't talk anymore unless you bring my darling." As that's where we're going to end today's video. Hope you all enjoyed. If you guys want part 3, 700 comments, and you guys will get the next part. I do say this often as what I should do. I do not have time to record, so I can't release the parts out as I want. But there'll be a link right here on your screen or in the description to a fanfic channel I'm currently working on. This is a little fanfic channel where it's all mainly text-to-speech, but you guys can send me your suggestions on the comment section, see which one you guys want to see on there. Thank you all for watching this video, and I hope you all enjoyed. Goodbye.